So today we're going to talk about potting mix, or you guys might say potting soil. To do that, before I teach you how to make your own mix and give you my recipe, I'm going to talk about the word soil. Soil, right. Soil is not what you think it is. Soil is what we have in the garden. It's what our lawns grow in. It's what quite a lot of our borders and beds have in them. But soil is a very, very different thing from what we use to pot up in the greenhouse and containers and things to bring indoors for our indoor plants. That is something called a potting mix. Okay, now here's the difference. It's not that complicated unless you want to get into the real proper science. Soil is mostly inorganic, okay? It's made up of clay, silt, sand, bits of rock particles, rock dust, that kind of thing. There is a small amount of organic matter in there that comes from the natural environment, so leaf litter and things breaking down. But on the whole, soil is actually inorganic. Okay? Now, that is fine outdoors. Things happen in the world. The plants get the nutrients they need through natural events. But if we put them in a pot, a container, that type of thing, we may not get the results that we're expecting because we're changing things up. So in that case, what we do is we make our own mix, okay? And it's actually soilless. There's no soil in it. It's actually, in the majority, organic matter. There's a little bit of inorganic matter in there, but it's mostly organic in the form of things like compost, okay? And that's what we're going to do then. So we're going to jump over, I've set up the wee table, we're going to jump over and I'm going to start making my mix and I'll talk you through it as I do that. Let's go. And remember, if this is the type of content you like, go on, smack that like button. Let's grow those likes. And if you want to know every time I post a video, click that subscribe button and hit that little bell. And that way you'll get notified when the next video comes out. Right, let's get on with things. Okay, so now that we've talked about what soil is and what it isn't, let's talk about potting soil then, or potting mix as we should be calling it, because what we're going to do today is we're going to learn how to make our own, but there's no soil in it at all, which is really, really common. So potting mix then, it is basically a mix of ingredients to make the perfect environment for your plants. And when we talk about potting mix, it's potting or any type of containers, pots, that type of thing. So the plants that are in pots in my garden, I want to make sure they've got the perfect environment that they need for them. And for me, living in Scotland, that generally means I want something that's nutritious, has good water retention, but is very free draining. And no, that's about it actually. Nutrition, holds on to water, but lets the water go and doesn't flood. That's essentially what I need. But that's my garden and my plants. You may, for instance, you may grow succulents, maybe in a rockery. You may grow ferns, which are a whole different thing again. You may grow small shrubs, and you need to think about what those plants need. So what we're going to do today then is we're going to tell you about all the ingredients that go into a potting mix, what they do and why we add them, and I'll give you my recipe so that you can then go away, start with that base and think, what do I need for my plants? And you've got all the knowledge you need so that you can make your own potting mix. So it starts like this then. So I said before, all my potting mixes are soilless, okay? There's no soil in them at all. But what there is in is this. Compost, okay? Now, this is just the compost that I was showing you guys when I sieved it out for my seed mix, okay? If I'm using this in pots indoors, again, I'd sterilise it. But it is just good old garden compost. Now, you may go, Eli, that's dirt, that's soil. Well, actually, technically it's not. This is made from organic matter, which is rotted down, composted. So for me, that is mostly garden waste and kitchen waste and sort of excess paper and things for my browns. That's what this is. It's not technically soil. Okay? So that's the main ingredient. What else will I put in there? Well, That compost is really rich in nutrients, so I don't need to feed my plants when I pot them up. This will feed them, give them all the nutrients they need for a little while, but it is quite water retentive, okay? If I just used compost on its own out in the garden, it would get really, really bogged down with the wind here. Oh, it's getting windy. This could be interesting in a second. So the next ingredient I add then, and this works with compost and lets me tell you about something. Believe it or not, it's this. Okay, no, it's not a brick, don't worry. This is something called coir, or cocoa coir. It's basically made from the husks of coconuts, you know, the really fibrous stuff. It is brilliant for adding volume. It's quite light and airy, so it adds lots of air into your mix. It does have a bit of water retention as well, but the reason I'm going to talk about this is, I mentioned compost, okay? Now, what you guys will probably see most often when we talk about compost, potting mixes, that kind of things, you'll see the word peat, okay? Now, my compost, as I said, it's pretty much garden waste and kitchen waste. There is no peat in it. I don't use peat products. But what you'll see quite often now to replace the peat products is this. It's the coir from the coconut, okay? I won't go into all the environmental and political things. You know, you guys can look this up for yourself. But these are the two things you'll hear mentioned a lot. I do a mix of both because this helps to just add that lightness and that air and that fluffiness. Obviously it doesn't look like this though. What you do is you can buy it in these bricks and then you soak that in water. So this one brick takes about 4 litres of water-ish, and then what happens is it expands and it becomes almost like the compost. I've got little bits of perlite in here because it's windy and perlite's blowing around. We'll talk about perlite in a second. But yeah, this is the coir, or cocoa coir. It's very, very light, it's fibrous, it holds onto the water nicely, but it still allows for that really light and airy texture in there. And if you guys buy any of this, you'll see just how light it is. It weighs next to nothing. So that's cocoa coir, okay? The next thing then, I've already mentioned this, and it's this. It's perlite. Now you can see this weighs next to nothing. It actually probably weighs less than polystyrene. But what that does is it adds really, really good draining to your soil because it doesn't really absorb any water or anything really. It's very, very lightweight, so it doesn't bog your plants down, it doesn't bog the roots down, and it just helps to keep your entire mix nice and free and airy, and it stops it being compacted, basically. I'm trying to think if there's a fancy way to say it, but it's generally that. These are the 3 ingredients I use in my mix, okay? Now, you can substitute perlite for horticultural grit. It will do the same job. It's a little bit heavier than perlite, but it does exactly the same job. So, for me, all of that together is my potting mix. Okay, so what is this then? So basically what I'm wanting to talk to you about, and it's where this comes in, is you have your base for your potting mix, okay? Now, your base is the organic materials. So do you remember we talked about how the soil in our garden is generally inorganic with a little bit of organic? Well, our potting mix is going to be mostly organic with a little bit of inorganic added. And that's the word, added. We're going to put additives in it to make it the perfect environment. So, mine, the organic material, that is your cocoa coir and it is your compost. And that is the majority of my potting mix. I've got my perlite, which is inorganic. You could also add, I mentioned horticultural grit. You can also add sharp sand. We'll do the same thing. Again, it helps with the whole draining element of it. But again, like your horticultural grit, sand can get heavy when it's wet and it can compact a little bit. So you've got to be careful on your ratios when you use different things. Okay? Now, another thing you may hear about is vermiculite. It's very similar to perlite. It's a bit more of a kind of a beigey colour, but it actually holds onto the water much better than perlite. So if you want more water retention but you don't want to add more organic, you could add vermiculite in. So that is essentially how you make a mix. This is my recipe. It's very complicated. Are you ready? Now, I was asked about percentages. It's even easier than that. What we're going to do is we're going to do in volume, which means it doesn't matter the size of measuring container you use. You just stick to that as your volume. So for me, my mix starts off with 2 parts of compost. To that, I'm going to add 2 parts of cocoa coir. One part of perlite, which is very light and blows away in the wind. It's much better to do this indoors, but my greenhouse isn't big enough to do this and have the camera. So we're outside and we're fighting with the wind. Now, give that a really good mix. Now, mix is key. You do not want to just sprinkle these on layers in your pots. It doesn't work unless it's all mixed together. So if you're trying to fix a pot that's maybe too wet, you can't just sprinkle perlite or sand or whatever on top. You have to repot the plant and mix it through. So there you go. That is my potting mix. I told you this was dead easy. You guys, if you want, you can start with this base and you can adjust it to suit your needs. So you could start with this and then go, ooh, I think my pots are a little bit wet. Just add in another additive. So maybe instead of 1 part perlite, alter yours so there's more perlite, or add sand. Or, do you remember I sieved my compost? And I showed you that it had all of this sort of bits of bark, bits of twigs, fluffy bits, you know, that kind of stuff. I don't throw that away. I can either put that into my compost bin and let it keep going, or if I want to add a bit more volume, a bit more airiness to my mix, I can add this back in. As long as I'm not planting seeds in it, then it's fine for me for the plants that I'm planting. So that's my potting mix. It's awesome, it's light, it's airy. My plants are going to love it.